Presenting about breaking the sex binary, which I will definitely be going more into as we go along. Um, so just a quick little about me. My name is Allison. I use they, them pronouns. I guess I didn't write it on the screen, but I am the assistant coordinator at the Pride Center, and I have been in this role. This is my fourth year. Prior to that, I did spend 2 years as a graduate student at the Pride Center, serving as a Pride House mentor. Um, I have a master's degree in counseling that I got from San Diego State University, from our university here. I have my bachelor's degree from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and then I'm actually working right now to get some AAs and maybe become an ASL interpreter at San Diego Mesa College. I also really enjoy being outside. I love running. I love traveling. So I included just like some fun photos from that up there. But I also really love being inside with my two cats. There is a decent chance they'll be making an appearance during the presentation today. I have some bird and squirrel TV on for them to hopefully prevent that, but you never know. And then I just added some photos of myself with my coworkers. I have just made really great connections at San Diego State in this position. And so I'm just really appreciative of them. So that's just a little bit about me. And then I want to also start with a land acknowledgement. So just to essentially recognize and honor the fact that we are on unceded land at anywhere in well, anywhere but in San Diego right now, the Kumeyaay land. So for millennia, the Kumeyaay people have been a part of this land. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the San Diego State community, we acknowledge this legacy, we promote this balance and harmony, we find inspiration from this land, the land of the Kumeyaay. So just a very brief overview of the Pride Center for anyone who isn't familiar. So we're one of 9 cultural centers at SDSU, and we're located kind of near Trader Joe's in the KPBS building at the top of campus. And so through our programming, resources, and educational efforts, we really strive to provide and promote a space where all folks within the 2S LGBTQIA plus community are seen, accepted, and valued. We encourage both learning and unlearning, so learning new information, but also unlearning information that maybe isn't correct or maybe has more nuance to it that we've learned kind of like throughout our lives, growing up in society, etc. And then we welcome and embrace fluidity in identity and ideas by challenging normative ideas and definitions. So very brief overview, but wanted to make sure I kind of set a little bit more of kind of like who we are at the Pride Center, since I'm representing the Pride Center right now. So we're actually going to get started with a little Kahoot, if any of you are familiar. Um, I am, I'll be pressing start. You can either go to um, kahoot.it and put in this game pin. You can also scan the QR code to join, or if you happen to have the Kahoot app, you are welcome to go on that way. I would love I think that'd be so cool if folks have the Kahoot app. But this is just a way to kind of introduce the topic that I'll be covering today, and also to kind of get an idea of maybe what you already know, what you maybe don't know. It's completely okay if you don't know anything about this topic or know very little about this topic. That's why I'm here, but it is, I think, helpful for me to kind of know where like we're at here. And it's a fun way to do this. My background is in school counseling, and when I was a middle school counseling intern, the middle schoolers were very into Kahoot, and it got me really into Kahoot. I love using it now. Okay, I'll probably give about maybe like 30 more seconds for anyone else to join. I'm not sure if there's anyone still trying to get in. but want to make sure that folks can if they want. Fun little Kahoot life hack if you are wanting one. If you join the free version and say that you're a K through 12 educator, you get 40 free participants instead of 10. So I like to kind of tell folks that in case they're wanting to get Kahoot and have more people be able to join. And then I believe that even if you are not able to join now, or if you're getting kicked out, I believe that the pin will still be at the top. So you can still join after. Because I see like some people kind of like going in and out, and I'm so sorry. Well, that's happening. Oh yeah, I will not lock it, so folks can still join. But I'm gonna get started. So the first question, hopefully the pin is somewhere on here. The first question is, which of the following determines a person's sex? So is it the red triangle, genitalia, and internal anatomy? Is it the blue diamond, sex chromosomes? Is it the yellow circle, hormone levels, or the green square, all of the above? And I guess the game pin is down here if you still are trying to join. So it is all of the above. I always am tempted to say more about it, but we're going to talk so much more about this in depth during the presentation. So I will resist the urge to explain all of the different things in this moment, but it is all of the above. We'll go on to the next question after we first look at the little scoreboard that Kahoot loves to do. So the next question is, what does intersex mean? So is it the red triangle, a person born with differences in their external anatomy? The blue diamond, an umbrella term for differences in sex traits and or reproductive anatomy? The yellow circle, someone who was raised gender neutral? Or the green square, a term for anyone who understands sex is not binary? So it is the blue diamond, an umbrella term for differences in sex traits and or reproductive anatomy. And like I said, I'll be going a lot more in depth about it shortly during the presentation. So we'll go on to the scoreboard. Some movement on it, wonderful. And then we'll go on to the next question. So what is the procedure typically used to determine a baby's sex at birth? Is it the red triangle blood testing, the blue diamond chromosome analysis, the yellow circle, we don't assign sex at birth, or the green square looking at a baby's genitals? Correct. It is the green square looking at a baby's genitals. This is the typical procedure that's used, and we'll definitely be talking more about that soon too. All right, here's our scoreboard. We've got an answer streak with a little fire icon. That's always fun. And we'll go on to our next question. So how common are intersex variations? About the red triangle, about 1 in 25 births, the blue diamond, about 1 in 100 births, the yellow circle, about 1 in 1,000 births, or the green square, about 1 in 10,000 births. So intersex variations are about 1 in 100 births. They're actually as common as the redheaded population estimated. So that's why I used Merida as my photo for that question. I like to say it's a hint, but I don't know if you would necessarily know how common the redheaded population is, but if you do, Merida being there is a hint. So anyways, going on to the next, well, actually going to the scoreboard, we've definitely got some movement here. We've got some answer streaks. We've got some movement. It's great. We'll go on to the next question. So true or false, it is possible to be intersex and not realize it until becoming a teenager or an adult. Is that true or false? It is true, and like I've been saying, I will definitely be saying more about it shortly. So here's our scoreboard. Some answer streaks, but not a lot of movement in the scoreboard. And then we'll go on to the next question. second to last. True or false, some intersex variations come with medical complications. It is true, but I like to say that anyone can have medical complications, and I'll be saying even more about it as usual. I will be in the rest of the presentation. So here's our scoreboard. Got a long answer streak, and we're moving on to the last question. So true or false, being intersex is a natural human variation. It is true, and I'll be talking a lot more about that. I think that's kind of the theme of the presentation. So I'll be addressing it directly, but also I think kind of showing this throughout the presentation, even in indirect ways. So the last thing is to look at the podium, I believe. Yes, the podium. So we can see who has won this game and all of the fun icons that folks have chosen. And they dance, and it's a great time. Then they're going to say that I can claim my rewards through Kahootopia, which I am not going to be doing. Don't know what that means. There it is. Okay. Thank you all so much for playing along and for being engaged with that. I hope that it was enjoyable, that you had a good time. Sorry, I have to take something away from my cats. And yeah, I just appreciate the engagement with it. So we're going to jump right in now that we've kind of covered the basics of what I'm going to be going over. So when a baby is born, doctors do this very unscientific procedure to determine a baby's sex assigned at birth, and that is, as mentioned in the Kahoot, just looking at a baby's genitals. We know, though, that this is a really simplified way of looking at sex. And actually, sex is a lot more complicated than just a doctor looking at a baby's genitals to determine that. So, sex assigned at birth actually includes a lot more components than just genitalia. It does include genitals, and we all have different shapes and sizes of our external genitalia. It also includes gonads, which is our internal anatomy. So my cat is here. She might come up. This includes different shapes and sizes and ranges of function of our internal anatomy. So that can include ovaries, testes. Sex assigned at birth also includes chromosomes, our sex chromosomes. So we usually think of that as either having XX chromosomes or XY, but it can also include just a singular X chromosome, which is here represented by XO. It can include XXY chromosomes. There are a number of different pairings, but those are just a few examples. And then sex assigned at birth also includes our sex hormones. So that includes varying levels of testosterone, estrogen, and androgen. And so when we kind of look at this, we realize that sex is a lot more complicated than just being able to look at a baby's genitals and kind of determine what their sex is at birth, which then leads to so many different expectations throughout a person's life as they continue to grow older. So what is the sex binary and what ideas and assumptions make up the sex binary? I would love to, if you all feel comfortable, I would love to hear from you all about what you think that the sex binary is and the ideas and assumptions that make up the sex binary. And it's completely okay if you don't know, it's completely okay if you guess. This is really just kind of trying to start the conversation about what this concept is that I'm going to be going a lot more in depth into. So you can share it in the chat if you want. I'm okay with like folks turning on their mics if they want to share, but I also understand that might not be what folks want to do too. Okay, so roles that are assigned and or available to you based on your gender. Definitely, I would say that the gender binary and kind of the gender roles that come with that are absolutely included within the sex binary and how that has been created. Thank you, Rachel. Anyone else? Yeah, the idea that there are only two sexes, definitely. Thank you. That's definitely a part of the sex binary. The binaural, I'm not sure, I'm honestly not familiar with that word, but scope that equates sex and gender. Yeah, the kind of concept that brings sex and gender into the assumption that it's binary and that they go together and that they are, what's the word I'm trying to think of, that they are unchanging. Definitely a part of the sex binary. All right. Thank you all for participating in the chat. Totally okay if you want to still put some more things in the chat, but I am going to move on to the next slide. So, what is a sex binary? It's this idea that there are two distinct sexes and that each person within these sexes fits into one of the following boxes. So, according to the sex binary, you are either assigned female at birth, which means that a person has a vulva, which includes a specific shorter length clitoris. I'm not exactly sure what the kind of like criteria, quote unquote, is for determining if something is a clitoris or a penis, but it is done in a very binary and kind of socially constructed way. So someone, according to the sex binary, who's assigned female at birth also would have functional ovaries. It also assumes that someone assigned female at birth has a specific range of estrogen and testosterone levels. My cat has officially made her appearance. And the assumption that someone's testosterone levels for someone assigned female at birth are going to be lower than someone assigned male at birth. I think there are also kind of distinct um, criteria for the level of estrogen or testosterone in an individual. Unfortunately, I'm not a scientist and I don't know what those exact numbers are that, or like even the exact like scientific language that's used to include this, but it is generally seen as very distinct and it has been socially constructed. And then this idea that if someone is assigned female at birth, then they must have XX chromosomes. So according to the sex binary, someone either falls into that box or they fall into the assigned male at birth category, which assumes that someone has a penis, which is a specific longer length, longer than a clitoris. Again, I don't remember the exact kind of like length criteria that's used, but it is definitely socially constructed. Um, that someone who's assigned male birth also has functional testes. They also have a specific range of estrogen and testosterone levels, with the assumption that testosterone levels are going to be higher than someone assigned female at birth, and then also has XY chromosomes. So essentially, it's this idea that there are these two boxes, these two sexes, and that everyone um, fits into one of these two boxes. And so I think kind of right away, we might start thinking about the fact that really none of us fit perfectly into these boxes. And I would love to hear kind of some of your thoughts around what you notice about these boxes, what thoughts come up when viewing the slide, and was this something that you had thought of before? And again, you can put that in the chat. You're welcome to turn on your mic if you prefer. But yeah, I would love to hear kind of folks' reactions to this slide and these boxes. And while you're typing, my cat is going to continue to try to step on the keyboard. So if there's a random selection of letters that gets sent to you all, that's why.
I notice that they are I technically like polar opposites almost. Like there's a sense that like one is the opposite of the other.
Yeah, noticing that they're opposites of each other, one's the opposite of the other. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Yeah, David.
Yeah, it's just not like based in reality. What we know is true.
Yeah, so it's not based in reality for what we know is true, for also folks' lived experiences too. Definitely. Thank you. Any other thoughts that come up? Yes, lots of assumptions, definitely. All right. Thank you all. So yeah, as I kind of started to mention in the last slide, and as definitely some of you mentioned as well, there's a these boxes are very constraining and they really are not a reflection of reality. In reality, we all are going to have a different range of our sex hormones. Some folks might still have, for example, might be assigned female at birth and like do truly have lower levels of testosterone than what is considered typical for someone assigned male at birth, but that range is still going to be different person to person. Sometimes someone assigned female at birth is going to have higher levels of testosterone than someone assigned male at birth. Our genitalia is going to be different shapes, sizes, and lengths. That is not something that's going to fit perfectly into these two distinct boxes. One of the ones that comes up a lot when I present this to students is the functional ovaries, functional testes. A lot of times when we talk about kind of like how do we um, how do we like quote unquote biologically define what it means to be female, what it means to be male? A lot of times it honestly will exclude folks who are going through menopause or maybe are not able to conceive children. A lot of these assumptions, like was also mentioned in the chat, are made through these boxes. And in reality, we really none of very few of us, if any of us, perfectly fall into either of these boxes. Um, we're all too different and we have too many variations as human beings, as individuals, to be able to perfectly fit into these two boxes. And so the term intersex is a term that can be kind of used to capture these differences and folks who fall outside of these two distinct sex binary boxes. So intersex is a naturally occurring variation in sex assigned at birth, where a person's genitalia, internal anatomy, sex chromosomes, hormones, and or secondary sex characteristics, which are the characteristics that can come up during puberty, fall outside of what we typically assume to be quote unquote male and quote unquote female. And this is an identity category. So even if someone does fall outside of these distinct boxes, it doesn't necessarily automatically mean that someone is going to identify as intersex, but many who do identify with this identity. And it really is up to the individual, but it also kind of helps us talk more freely and openly about this idea that the sex binary is not a reflection of reality, both scientifically and folks' lived experiences. So how common are intersex variations? It's likely that they're more common than we know. My guess is that most of us have not taken genetic tests to determine what our sex chromosomes are officially. So sometimes we might not know how many intersex folks are truly out there, but it's about 1 in 100 individuals who are born with intersex variations. The intersex population is also about as common as the redheaded population, as I mentioned in the Kahoot. So that's about 1 to 2 in 100 births. And then one of my, I think, favorite like statistics, I guess, that I learned within the last few years, as opposed to like 5 or 6, 7 years ago when I started doing presentations like this, is that intersex variations are actually more common than identical twins. And identical twins are about 3 in 1,000 births. And so part of the reason why this slide exists is to show that sometimes intersex variations are seen as quote unquote abnormal, quote unquote unnatural, something along those lines. But they're about as common as the redheaded population and more common than identical twins. And we don't usually say that the redheaded population is abnormal, unnatural, disordered, quote unquote, anything like that. And same with identical twins, which are less common than intersex variations. And so intersex variations really are very common. When I used to teach sex ed with high school students, I used to tell them, if you know a redheaded person, you probably also know an intersex person, and their jaws would always drop because they were just mind blown about this. So I think that this can really help conceptualize how common folks are in the intersex community. So these are some examples of intersex variations to kind of also give you an idea of how common each of these variations are. I always like to say that I would caution you if you choose to kind of like look up any of these intersex variations, because some of the kind of like official websites for them are, especially like the medical ones, are still pretty stigmatizing and kind of will sometimes reinforce the sex binary, unfortunately. In some ways, they're doing great work to, bring awareness and also make sure that any true medical concerns are addressed, but other times the language still kind of stigmatizes some of these identities. So just a kind of more caution if you do choose to look any of these identities up. But also to give you just more information about how common the different variations are. So some of the most common times for folks to be labeled intersex or to start identifying as intersex, or maybe for folks to identify them as intersex, would be at birth. So this would typically be when a doctor or nurse notices genital differences, or genitals are different than what would be expected. Another time that can be common is at puberty. So some might not experience puberty on their own. Others might experience puberty differently than what they might expect. So maybe they were assigned male at birth, and then kind of the assumption of what puberty is going to look like for someone who is assigned male at birth ends up going differently. That might be a time when someone finds out that they're intersex. Another time could be when someone is trying to conceive. So that could be due to infertility. Some intersex folks are infertile, but often this is because of childhood medical intervention. So that can be when someone finds out that they're intersex. And then another time could be during adulthood, which I guess is along the same lines as trying to conceive. And that can often be when that can sometimes be when folks find out that adults in their lives covered up childhood medical interventions that then leads to them realizing that they are intersex. So to kind of touch a little bit more on these childhood medical interventions. So intersex surgeries, I believe that they are less common now. But what ends up happening is that sometimes medical professionals will decide that it is important for a baby, an infant, whoever, for their body to conform to the sex binary that we were talking about before. So if, let's say, someone is born generally assigned female at birth, but I talked about how there's like a specific criteria for the length of a clitoris, and if their clitoris is quote unquote too large, then medical professionals might recommend a surgery to quote unquote correct this and have their bodies conform to the sex binary that we were talking about. Another one that I think of a lot, because this person wrote a book that I really like. It's called Inverse Cowgirl. I don't remember her last name, but her first name is Alicia. She was born, she talks a lot about her story. So she was born assigned female at birth, but she has androgen insensitivity syndrome, which is an intersex variation. And so she was born with undescended testes. And doctors very quickly recommended to her parents that they needed to be removed, both to have her body conform to the sex binary, but also kind of a misinformation that those undescended testes were likely to develop testicular cancer, which is absolutely not true, especially not before puberty. And so unfortunately, her parents, wanting to, take the advice of medical professionals, had her internal testes removed. And unfortunately, what happened is her body then was unable to produce her sex hormones. With not to get into like the scientific details of androgen insensitivity syndrome, but essentially her body would have produced testosterone, but then converted it into estrogen. And those sex hormones are really important for a person's bone health. Again, not a scientist, so if I'm not getting the exact details right, I'm very sorry. But essentially, bone health is very related to a person's sex hormones. And because she had her reproductive anatomy removed that was responsible for producing those sex hormones, she actually developed osteoporosis in her 30s. She has to now take hormone replacement therapy for the rest of her life to make sure that her bones don't continue to decrease in their like density. And so I guess I'm just trying to highlight that a lot of these intersex surgeries that are not medically necessary can create a lot of harm and a lot of problems for intersex individuals, all in the name of trying to force a baby or toddler infant's body to conform to our kind of standards of the sex binary that I was talking about at the very beginning. And I think something that's really interesting is a weird word because it's also very sad, but it is also very interesting to me, is that trans legislation that is being passed right now, either always, or if not always, almost always has specific exceptions for intersex surgeries. So we have this legislation that's being passed saying that people can't make autonomous decisions about their body, but we can have doctors and medical professionals make decisions about a baby or infant's body before they're able to give consent in order for it to conform to kind of our standards for what it means to be assigned male at birth or what it means to be assigned female at birth. And so I think that kind of really highlights that this anti-trans legislation that talks about, like the harm that these like hormones will cause to people or children, or the harm that these surgeries that folks want, the harm that this will cause to people. It really isn't about the harm, and it really isn't about wanting to protect children, because they're making exceptions for children to be able to have these medically unnecessary surgeries that can cause a lot of health complications later on in their lives. Another kind of like really weird part of kind of some of the rhetoric around intersex surgeries is a lot of times medical professionals will phrase it in a way that sexualizes children, which is really gross. So sometimes it'll be like, well, we want to make sure that, one day when this infant grows up, they're going to be able to have this like kind of normative idea of sex. Don't you want your child to be able to grow up and have this like quote unquote normal sex, which is just such a weird thing to talk about when it comes to making a decision for a child, a baby, an infant. And so I think that just a lot of the kind of rhetoric going on right now is like quote unquote to protect the children, but there is so much not protecting of children that is being done when intersex surgeries are being talked about. And I really encourage you, if you are interested, to read the book Inverse Cowgirl by Alicia, which I forget her last name. But she is super great. And I think she really just does a lot of sharing her own story and highlighting just um, much how much pain and harm that was caused to her when she was an infant and had her internal testes removed without her consent. She's a really great writer and a really great activist too. So this is something I like to spend a little bit more time on, to kind of talk about what's going on with the kind of rhetoric and narratives around intersex surgeries that are medically unnecessary. I actually had someone in my life in the past who was intersex. She had Turner syndrome, and when she realized that she had Turner syndrome, I believe around like 15 or 16 years old, it is true that she needed to take hormone replacement therapy because her body wasn't producing estrogen on its own. So her bone health was also declining even as a 16-year-old. And so the recommendation for taking estrogen to help her bone health was a very legitimate thing to be told by a medical professional. What wasn't legitimate was she was also told at 16, don't you want to fill out your prom dress one day? So I think that really highlights also this kind of difference between medical professionals looking out for real medical concerns versus medical professionals trying to force or encourage someone to have their body conform to the sex binary. And so that's also kind of why I brought that up, to talk about then the possible health complications. Again, anyone can have health complications in their life that can come with just being a human. I do think it can be helpful, though, to know that there are some intersex variations that can come with health complications. For example, like I said, Turner syndrome. Often someone's body isn't producing sex hormones on their own. And so in order to improve their bone health, taking hormone replacement therapy is important. But I do want to highlight too that it is more common that the unnecessary medical interventions are what lead to the health complications, like I was talking about with Alicia, where she has to take hormone replacement therapy for the rest of her life to prevent osteoporosis, or I think to further to not have her osteoporosis get worse. So I really just want to highlight and emphasize that intersex is normal, intersex is natural. We are all humans who naturally have a lot of variations within our bodies. And even though sometimes it's not talked about this way, these are natural variations in what it means to be a human being. And then these are some intersex folks and organizations to follow if you're interested on Instagram, or you can also Google them and see if there's any other way to follow them. The person I keep mentioning, Alicia, this is her Instagram. I love that her handle is XOXY Alicia. I love that she like plays on like the XOXO, but her sex hormones are XY, so she has XOXY as a part of her handle, which I just think is very fun. And then these are some organizations that are there to advocate for and protect the rights of intersex folks that are really great. A lot of these folks appear in my Instagram feeds, and I love to be able to learn from them. And that's all from me. Thank you all so much. And